Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the School of Arts and Sciences Speaker Series. We are here for Conversations of Care. Our presentation today helps to recognize October as Domestic Violence Awareness Month. I'm your moderator. My name is Bobby Lane Lee, and I'm a faculty member in the Speech Communication and Theater Department, and I'm a proud member of the Arts and Sciences Speakers Series. We have 3 featured guest speakers today, which include Amanda Callahan from Safe Harbor, Anna Castellanos from the South Carolina Coalition Against Domestic Violence and Sexual Assault,
Was she going to go to her eye doctors?
and Carrie Walker Nettles from the Julie Valentine Center.
She flags, I know.
Before we get started, please note that one of my fellow faculty members, Catherine Blass from the English faculty, she is going to be looking at the chat box. So throughout the presentation, if you have any questions for the speakers, you can go ahead and put that question in the chat box. And then at the end of our presentation today, we will have about 15 minutes for a question and answer session. So let me begin by telling you about our first speaker, which is Amanda Callahan. Amanda Moon Callahan is the Director of Prevention and Outreach for Safe Harbor. She joined the Safe Harbor team 11 years ago as the Megan Project Coordinator and played an instrumental role in designing and shaping which is now the Relationship Education Project, or REP, REP. REP is a primary prevention program and curriculum designed to enhance youth awareness of relationship abuse and healthy relationships, and give them positive skills to combat abuse through education, interaction, and advocacy to stop domestic violence. Amanda earned her Bachelor of Arts in Philosophy and Gender Studies at Rollins College, and then her Master of Arts in International Human Rights at the University of Denver. So we're so pleased to have you here. Thank you for joining us, Amanda.
Thank you so much. I'm excited to be here and be a part of this conversation. Thank you to everyone who is showing up today for Domestic Violence Awareness Month. And I think I am sharing my screen at this point. Okay, excellent. All right, well, I'm excited about this series and the fact that Greenville Tech is recognizing October and sharing a really important message with young people about domestic violence. I think that one of the myths that we have as a culture and as a society is that domestic violence is something that happens in marriages when you get older between adults, and that is just not the case. As the Director of Prevention and Outreach at Safe Harbor, we see dating violence beginning in middle school, and part of the role that we provide in our community is to start having those conversations as early as we can so that we can prevent domestic violence. And so very excited to be here and to be a part of this series. And I want to tell you a little bit about Safe Harbor and our services. So many of you might have heard of Safe Harbor in your community. We are the domestic violence organization that serves upstate South Carolina, and that includes Anderson County, Greenville County, Oconee County, as well as Pickens County. So those 4 county service areas are our little splice of South Carolina. And at Safe Harbor, our really overarching mission or vision, which is a really big vision to have, a very big piece of the pie here, is to influence a culture where all people feel safe and valued in their relationships. And we do that of services that to survivors and their family and their children. We hope to eliminate domestic violence through a coordinated community response, prevention, and education. So those are kind of a lot of big words to explain our services. So I want to kind of walk you through what it looks like if you were to reach out to Safe Harbor and our services. So at the very top, you'll see you would call our 24-hour crisis line. Our helpline is staffed at all hours of every single day, 24/7, 365, and it's really our first point of entry to our services. So you call the 1-800 number and you're going to be met with a trained volunteer or staff person on the other end of that line, and they will take you through a very quick intake process, which is they'll be asking you a little bit about why did you call today? Can you tell us about your relationship? What was the most recent incidents? What has been the history? So just some very basic questions. And the intention is to make sure that the primary issue that you're experiencing is domestic violence. And I'll give you a couple more slides after I explain our services so that, because I think a lot of the myths that prevent people from calling is, oh, well, it's not really violence. So we'll talk about that in a second, but call our crisis line, go through a very, we try to make it as short as possible intake to make sure that you're a great fit. And then the very last question that our trained staff or volunteer is going to ask you is, how can we help you today? And usually people respond in one of two ways primarily. And first is, I need a safe place to go. And so that's our first service, and what most people know us for in the community, which is that we provide emergency safe shelters for victims and their children. Those safe shelters are open at all times and staffed round the clock by our wonderful staff. We operate 3 confidential locations in Greenville and Anderson and Oconee. And really, once you identify that that's your need and we have open bed spaces, you have the chance to come to one of our confidential locations and stay with us. And once you walk in that door, we try to provide as much as we can at no cost to victims and their children. And once you come in that door, you're going to be met with case management, advocacy on your behalf. You'll be receiving one-on-one domestic violence education with your family advocate. We'll be going through safety planning, all sorts of stuff once you come in through that door. The other thing that people mostly say when they go through our intake, maybe they don't need a safe place to go right now, but perhaps they're in need of talking to somebody. Perhaps it's been a while since the domestic violence has happened and they're in a safe place, or they're in a safe place, but they need to speak to somebody or they want to go through that. And so our counseling and support groups are there. Our counseling program is really our larger program of the two. We connect you with a free counselor and again, in the Anderson, Oconee, and Greenville and Pickens areas. So somebody who's local, connect you with that free counselor who's really that person who can walk you through doing the domestic violence education and providing that safe space, trauma-informed counseling setting for you to start the healing process. So once you're either in our safe shelters space or our counseling program, you kind of unlock a host of other services that we help our survivors and families with that help to solve the issue of domestic violence in our community, which is a transitional housing program, assistance with orders of protection and legal advocacy when needed. And then, of course, on the other side of things, beyond just the intervention services and helping those survivors directly, we do a lot of community education.
Recording in progress.
So I want to tell you that a lot of times people don't reach out to us and call that 1-800 number because they don't, one, realize that they're in a domestic violence relationship. And number two, maybe they don't realize what domestic violence actually is. So very quickly, I want to tell you that domestic violence is a pattern of behavior. This pattern of behavior continues to happen. It may, it's about power and control, and it's not a one-time incident. And so this is oftentimes friends and family are helpful in saying, hey, I've noticed this is happening, right? It's this continual cycle that kind of comes around. And as you stay in that relationship, typically that violence continues to escalate. Again, I'm just speaking very typically and stereotypically, but I want you to understand what those patterns are. And here's the big kicker, is that domestic violence is not always physical abuse. And it doesn't have to be physical for you to reach out and call Safe Harbor services. This is often a myth that we hear, but even if it's never been physical, even if you are just experiencing extreme emotional abuse, and that your home is no longer a safe place for you to be, or you need somebody to talk to, right? It does not preclude you from receiving Safe Harbor services if the never escalated to physical abuse. We recognize all forms of abuse as domestic violence, whether it's physical, whether it's sexual, whether it's emotional or psychological abuse. All of those count on our book for Safe Harbor services. So to wrap up real quick, I just wanted to share a couple of ways for you to get involved in this issue, and then I'll share some contact information for Safe Harbor. If this is an issue, as Domestic Violence Awareness Month, right? It's October, right? How can we play a role in stopping domestic violence and being, excuse me, being a part of our community, right? Stay informed. You already started today, educating yourself about what domestic violence is. I encourage you to visit our website. There's a ton of wonderful information on it, and be that resource for others, right? Now, you know, on our website, it says about, it says learn more. You can click and learn all about how domestic violence affects different populations, people, all of those kinds of things on our website. And then, of course, if you're involved in a church community or another group, you can request a Safe Harbor speaker. If you're listening to this presentation and you were like, Amanda, this sounds like my friend, how do I help my friend? And that is the number one question we get when we do these speaking engagements. And here, real quick, is what you can do. First of all, believe them when they disclose that domestic violence is happening in their relationship, even if it may listen, right, with that person, offer options and referral resources without coercion. What does that mean? That means something like, well, if you don't leave them, then the abuse might not be that bad. That would be an example of what coercion sounds like. Or if you don't leave them, then I can't really be your friend anymore. So making sure that you don't do those things, and saying, wow, that sounds like really hard. Here's Safe Harbor's contact information. Here's Scad Voss's contact information, potentially Julie Valentine's contact information. I'm here to help you whenever you feel like you can. And of course, assure them that whatever abuse is happening, it is certainly not their fault that the abuse is happening. So lastly, to get involved specifically in Safe Harbor's efforts, if you're listening and you're like, man, I really want to take the next step and get involved, volunteer. You can volunteer with us. We are always looking for interns. If you're like, wow, that would be really neat to get involved with, we are recruiting right now for help for our helpline, our crisis line. We need interns and volunteers to help us staff that 24/7, 365. Of course, you can donate. If you haven't been, please visit our resale shop. It's up on Wade Hampton Road. My shirt is from there. I always try to wear stuff that I buy from the resale shop because it's so great. And of course, you can give. And lastly, here is our wonderful contact information. Definitely encourage you to go to Instagram, look us up at Safe Harbor SC, and give us a follow. And it's an easy way for you to stay engaged, not only learn about domestic violence and healthy relationships, but know how to get involved. So thank you so much for the few quick minutes today, and I look forward to any questions coming my way.
Thank you so much, Amanda. I really appreciate that. I really appreciate the recommendations too about helping for a friend. I can definitely see how important that would be. So our second speaker is Amanda Castellanos, and she is from the South Carolina Coalition Against Domestic Violence and Sexual Assault. And she is the coordinator for training and technology Prior to joining SCCADVASA, Anna worked as the bilingual outreach coordinator at Safe Harbor, an SCCADVASA member organization, for 3 years, where she raised awareness about the dynamics of domestic violence in the upstate of South Carolina. She has also done freelance work for Nuestro Estado, a Spanish language newsroom for the state of South Carolina, since March 2021. Anna graduated from Winthrop University in 2018 with a BA in political science and a BA in modern language with a concentration in Spanish. She completed an internship at an immigration law office, Cannell Law LLC, after college prior to joining Safe Harbor. Anna is currently pursuing an MS in digital media management at Arkansas State University. Welcome, Miss Anna.
Thank you so much. I'm really happy to be here, and I am here representing the South Carolina Coalition Against Domestic Violence and Sexual Assault. We call it SCDVASA because that's just way too long to say over and over again. So I'm going to talk about the services that, well, not the services that SCDVASA provides. I'm going to talk about SCDVASA in general. So SCDVASA is a private nonprofit that does not provide services the way Safe Harbor or the Julie Valentine Center does. We are more in the background. So we are the collective voice promoting the prevention of domestic violence, DV, and sexual assault, SA, in South Carolina. Our vision is a South Carolina free of domestic violence and sexual assault. Since 1981, SCDVASA has been a leader in representing the critical needs of survivors, and we are a pivotal voice in violence prevention. We advance our work through advocacy, education, and collaboration. This is a map of South Carolina, and it is divided up in the counties. So if you go to SCDVASA's website and you click on Get Help, you can either click on the name of the county, or you can click on this interactive map, and it will take you to the county and it'll list the domestic violence organization and the sexual assault organization so that you can find what you need where you are. So while we are a private and independently run nonprofit, we are highly collaborative, right? So as a coalition, we are made up of 22 member organizations like Safe Harbor and the Julie Valentine Center. We have 13 domestic violence organizations and 15 sexual assault organizations. Now, I'm not good at math. I don't know about you. I don't know if 13 plus 15 adds up to 22, but there is some overlap because some of the organizations are doing domestic violence and sexual assaults. We also have affiliate members. So affiliate members are nonprofit organizations. There's maybe some public organizations, maybe law enforcement jurisdictions, other people or groups or entities that are doing work that relates to ours, but they're not specifically a domestic violence organization and a sexual assault organization. So they are affiliate members, and we do work with them closely, but their work will look a little bit different than Safe Harbors and the Julie Valentine Center. So how does SCDVASA support survivors of domestic violence and sexual assault? When survivors need help dealing with violence and abuse, SCDVASA will provide information, training, and technical assistance to member organizations. We provide this kind of information about quality services and policy advocacy. We work to improve outcomes in the well-being and safety of survivors, and we work to secure federal and state funding to support our member organizations. So again, we are in the background. Member organizations are on the ground. They are helping survivors directly with things like hotlines, free and confidential advocacy, safety planning, emergency shelter, counseling, and other services that they are directly providing to survivors, their children, and their families. So when somebody needs legal protections or legal options, SCDVASA is advocating for improvements to laws, policies, and procedures that will be helpful for survivors' well-being. SCDVASA will provide legal assistance through our contract attorney program and connections to other legal services. A lot of the times when people go to a member organization, they will need legal help, and that member organization will contact SCDVASA, and we will connect them to a low bono or pro bono attorney. So our member organizations help survivors navigate the legal system. They will support survivors during sexual assault exams at the hospital. They will accompany them to court hearings and connect them with legal representation and other supportive systems. Again, we're in the background and member orgs are on the ground doing that great work. When survivors need the intervention of the police, of prosecutors, of judges, Skadvasa collects information from member organizations on what is working well and what problems still exist. We use this information to inform statewide efforts, and we also work to coordinate improvements to South Carolina's response to domestic violence and sexual assault in the criminal legal system. Our member organizations will assist survivors in working with these professionals. They collaborate with local offices and departments to build trauma-informed responses, and they promote a coordinated community response to domestic violence and sexual assault. So a lot of the times that's by working with the Domestic Violence Coordinating Committee and the Sexual Assault Response Teams, or SARTs. When survivors need a safe place to live, Skadvasa advocates for housing laws and policies that protect victims. We work with other state and federal organizations to advocate for affordable housing. We provide information and resources on safe housing options and accessing rental or other forms of available assistance. Our member organizations are offering emergency shelter, and they're offering things like transitional housing programs. So we all want to live in South Carolina in a world that is free from this kind of violence. Skadvasa advocates for systems and policy changes. We create statewide informational and targeted prevention campaigns, support our member organizations' work, and we hold the vision that South Carolina can be free from domestic violence and sexual assault. Our member organizations will deliver community and school-based presentations on the prevention of domestic violence and sexual assault, build community-based prevention teams, provide trauma-informed healing services for survivors, and offer opportunities for volunteers to do this kind of education and prevention work. So we'll have questions at the end, but I do want to share my contact information. And I will say I am pretty new to Skadvasa, and I'll do my best answering questions, but there may be things I don't know yet, and I'm happy to get back to you on them.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Anna. I really appreciate your contributions and gaining new information about the legal aspect of your organization. I want to remind everybody that the chat box is open. So if you have any questions as you listen to the speakers, please feel free to go ahead and type them up in the chat box. All right, here we go. We're headed towards our third speaker, and it is Miss Carrie Walker Nettles. She earned a BA in sociology from Clemson University and a Master's of Divinity from Lutheran Theological Southern Seminary. Carrie has traveled to General Theological Seminary to study with Jerome Berryman, specifically working on a theology of the child and the spirituality of the child. Carrie has worked with children's ministries of several churches and as a child advocate with the D. Norton Child Advocacy Center in Charleston, South Carolina. She completed her clinical pastoral education residency with the spiritual care department at Greenville Memorial Hospital. Carrie is an ordained minister, and she's endorsed to chaplaincy by the Alliance of Baptists. She has entered the board certification process with the APC. She is a member of the Association of Professional Chaplains and the Pediatric Chaplains Network. In January of 2017, the Julie Valentine Center made history as the first child advocacy center to employ a staff chaplain, and that's Carrie. Also, she and her spouse, Mason, they parent 2 children, ages 9 and 15, and herd a bunch of sheep, which I love that part as well. So thank you, Miss Carrie. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to be here. For those of you who aren't familiar with the Julie Valentine Center, we are the area sexual assault and child abuse recovery center. We are right here on Whitehorse Road, 2905 Whitehorse Road. We've been around in some iteration for 48 years. And our goal is to put ourselves out of business, frankly. We do a lot of the same work that we are a member organization with SCAD-VASA. We do a lot of collaboration with Safe Harbor. Their primary focus is domestic violence. Our primary focus is child abuse and sexual assault. But we know through poly-victimization data and research that there's often a lot of overlap through that. So we are also doing prevention, assisting in investigations, collaborating with these area organizations, and offering treatment and advocacy work similarly. Much like Safe Harbor, we have a community education department. We are trying to do as much prevention education as we can because we want to see a South Carolina and a world also free of child abuse and sexual assault. So we do as much community education as we can, from elementary schools through colleges to information sessions like this. And one of my primary roles is speaking with faith communities and helping them recognize the prevalence of this, and that no iteration of religion or spirituality is immune from child abuse and sexual assault. We offer services directly for children through our Child Advocacy Center. Forensic interviewers will meet with the child, help assist in interviewing the child for law enforcement or DSS or both. We have a collaboration with Prisma, the pediatric hospital iteration of Prisma. They have child abuse pediatricians there who will do forensic medicals at a number of our CACs in the upstate. And then we have free individual therapy and group therapy for our child and adult survivors. Our rape crisis hotline is much like Safe Harbor's hotline. We have staff and trained volunteers helping us answer that 24/7. We will go to any ER in Greenville County, which I think at this point there are about 8. We will go to be with a survivor who is getting a sexual assault kit done, or maybe even just considering getting a sexual assault kit. We will be there as usually the only person in the room who doesn't want something for them. We're not getting a statement. We're not collecting evidence. We are there to be a non-anxious and non-judgmental presence with them, offering them snacks, whatever they need. We also provide, we keep a stash in all of our ERs of general sizes of underwear, t-shirts, sweatshirts, depending on what season it's in, because sometimes our clients will need to surrender their clothing into evidence. And rather than having to leave in paper scrubs, we like to give them a nice soft t-shirt or sweatshirt. So we keep those stocked in all 8 ERs as well. And much like on the CAC side, our adult survivors of childhood sexual abuse or adulthood sexual abuse have access to advocacy services and free therapy services. And all of our services are free and confidential unless there is an iteration of child abuse that has not yet been reported. We are mandated reporters. Last year, we served over 2,400 clients. Over 800 of those were child clients, and roughly 75% of those cases were iterations of sexual assault, with the remaining 25% of those cases comprising physical abuse, neglect, and medical child abuse, which you may remember it was previously called Munchausen by proxy. So that percentage stays the same most every year. About 75% of our child cases are child sexual assault cases. I'm going to play a brief video for you, I think. But I can pull it up here. Just to explain the Child Advocacy Center model.
A Children's Advocacy Center, or CAC, provides support to victims of child abuse. Without a CAC, an abused child may have to tell their story over and over again in settings that may be scary or where kids may think that they're in trouble. Then, families have to search around for the services their children need, all on their own. But in a CAC, a child tells their story to a trained interviewer who makes the process gentle on the child and finds the facts which are crucial to the child's case. Then, a community of professionals in medicine, law enforcement and child protective services, prosecution, victim advocacy, and other heroes work through the CAC to decide the best way to help the child. And CACs provide science-backed mental health care that heals kids from trauma and helps them reclaim their futures. This community of caring professionals rallies around the child so children have everything they need, all in one place, at the CAC. To find your local CAC or to sign up for updates, visit nationalchildren'salliance.org.
Okay, so if you or your family or friends are looking for a CAC near you, you can go to our South Carolina network of child advocacy centers to find, this is just a screen grab, to find the CAC serving nearest your family or friends. The National Children's Alliance is a nationwide umbrella agency. They are also our accrediting body. So when we have to renew our accreditation, we're meeting with them and they are reviewing that we're meeting their standards. So you can go to their webpage and scroll down to search for the local CAC to your friend or colleague or family member anywhere in the country. You can support us by attending information sessions like this. You're welcome to come over and get a tour anytime. We love bringing in the community and trying to sort of demystify the process and who we are and what we do. You can follow us on any of our socials. We have an ongoing wish list on our website. We are always in need of, for example, peanut-free snacks for the children in the child's waiting area, or those sort of generic sizes of clothing, underwear, sweatpants, that kind of thing, for our ER closets. We have different iterations of volunteers, whether you want to volunteer to help us set up and break down our big fundraising events, or if you want to volunteer to be one of the advocates that help us staff our hotline and go to the ER. That involves a background check, reference checks, an interview, and 30 hours of victim service provider training. You can follow our socials or sign up for our newsletter. Scadvasa's newsletter is really great in terms of helping everyone be apprised of the latest legislation that is pending or on the chopping block and how that would directly impact the clients that both Safe Harbor and JVC serve. So if this is really part of your passion and calling, you probably want to sign up for that so you can stay in the loop. We have our business line and our 24-hour hotline. You can also email me directly at cnettles@julievalentinecenter.org. I am always happy to answer questions or come speak to a group. I'm just seeing this question. There's a lot more non-sexual child abuse happening that isn't being reported because hitting children and emotionally abusing children is somewhat accepted by our society. Wow, that's a really good question. So yes, yes. One of our prevention education annual offerings is called When Faith Hurts, and we market that specifically to faith communities. And one of the modules within that talks about corporal punishment and spanking. Most instances of child abuse in our service area start out as perfectly legal corporal punishment, but then exceeds that boundary for a number of possible reasons and becomes child abuse. The other thing about like the emotional abuse is that is a really hard thing to quantify and qualify. So for an investigator who's looking to get an arrest warrant, they have to meet a certain burden of proof. And then to go further into an actual court case, they need to meet an even higher burden of proof. And how do you demonstrate that how do you prove that someone has been emotionally abused? Emotional abuse, and I think this was probably true for both children and adults, is one of the sort of deepest, most long-lasting and impactful iterations of harm and violence, and almost impossible to prosecute. Amanda, I don't know if you want to add to that.
Well, Carrie, it's not against the law.
Thanks for pointing that out. Yeah.
It's not against the law. I mean, I think that there are ways to get around sometimes, using emotional abuse. There are forms in which we can criminally penalize for. An example of that would be a threat that doesn't actually cross the lines into harming someone physically. There's forms of stalking that could be considered emotional abuse that, again, never kind of cross the line to physical, but we live in a world in which emotional abuse is not against the law. And for children, I imagine we can prove, neglect. Those, criminal statutes that we have the ability to pull in some gray area and really make some cases on, but yeah.
Miss Catherine, do you have any questions that you would like to share with the speakers?
Yeah, if y'all have other questions, y'all want to send them to me real quick to Catherine Blast. Great. I do have a couple questions that I think one of these in particular, maybe voicing what others are wondering as well. So for me, I'm in a position of needing to refer people fairly often through the context of students, but also church, people reaching out in different ways, friends. So I've experienced in the past, just some confusion about who do I refer people to first? Because I know there is overlap, and my understanding is that y'all, the three of y'all work together a lot. But if y'all could speak to that, just in case others are wondering about that too.
So I should probably clarify this, that Julie Valentine Center does not have any residential iteration of our services. So if we have someone who has experienced sexual assault and they are looking for a safe place to be, I am always the one, if I'm the one in the ER, I'm the one picking up the hotline, calling Safe Harbor to look for a place for our client to stay. So certainly if there is a need to establish safety immediately, I would defer to Safe Harbor and law enforcement.
Thank you, that's helpful.
Yeah,
Sorry.
and then of course, if there's any reports or suspicions of child abuse or child sexual assault, that's an immediate, or on the phone to Julie Valentine Center in the same ways that she references Safe Harbor. And so yes, we do often a very close dance with each other when our clients are in services with us, and making sure that we're tag teaming and presenting a really concentrated and a solid effort of whatever services they need. So child abuse and sexual assault, definitely to Julie Valentine Center. And then when the home is no longer a safe place and there's violence happening within that home, and a child or an adult, a non-offending adult, is in need of a safe place, Safe Harbor's the place to call.
Okay.
And if you
Thank
call Skidwassa, we will send you back to Safe Harbor
Yep.
and the Julie Valentine Center. So call them first.
And then when we do have very complicated cases, especially legally and or that we just need more advocacy, we are on the phone with Skadvasa saying, we need extra services. Please get us this help. We have a very complicated case that we can't figure out or get the right resources for right now. And then they are doing the larger advocacy efforts behind the scenes on our organization's behalf.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Thank you all. That's really helpful. I got a question in the chat for Amanda. How many people can the shelters hold?
Thank you. Yeah, that's such a great question. And right now, I can't give you a solid number because it fluctuates so much. And especially as our services have changed with COVID, we've really redefined what it means to like live communally safely. And so I can say that, you know, pre-COVID, we were serving, and actually still in COVID, we're serving about 600 women and children each year in our emergency shelter services. And so at any one time, what that looks like, it very much fluctuates based off of, you know, if a mom comes in with 6 kids, or if there's single parents coming in, you know, so it just, the number isn't necessarily a target number I can give you, but I can tell you again, about 600 women and children that we're serving each year in our emergency shelter services. And then on the flip side of that, the part that is just so disheartening is that we do end up turning about 250 families away each year because of our full bed spaces. And so when that happens, we're on the phone with our wonderful other domestic violence organizations looking for open bed spaces. We're working with some other homeless shelters to say, do you have a bed tonight? Perhaps we'll have a bed open tomorrow. And so again, doing that dance with community service providers to make sure that someone has a safe place to go.
Can I also
Thank you.
just add that in South Carolina, every single county in the state has at least one pet. What's the word I want?
Animal
Shelter, an animal shelter.
Mhm.
And one more time, Anna, how many domestic violence shelters are there in the state again?
I think 13. Yeah.
13.
The difference is, though, we are not euthanizing survivors.
We are not euthanizing survivors,
There's a
but there
difference.
are more places to take an abused pet than there are for people to go.
Yes. Yes.
Whew. Thank y'all so much. I have one last question. So if a person is coming with kids, my understanding is that for Safe Harbor, if they're in a group shelter, they can't bring a boy in particular older than like 9. Is that not true?
That is not
Is there
true.
an age limit? Okay, good. So is there an age limit for like the kids that are coming in? Like if they're bringing in teenagers, would they be able to stay in the group shelter?
Yeah, so that's a
Yeah.
great question. And I think that one is a myth. And two,
Okay.
we have had policies like that in the past. However, that policy no longer stands.
Okay, cool. I must have
Yeah,
seen old
and so,
information.
yeah,
That's
yeah,
great.
I'm really glad you asked that question. And it really has to do with, again, the wonderful benefits that COVID presented to us. And we've just learned a different way of taking people into shelters, one of kind of those outdated policies. But at this point, really, we're keeping families together in family units. And so we're able to really just better have specific family units, and it's up to them, you know, within reason to choose who is staying with them in that family unit. And so even then, even before that, we would do it on a case-by-case basis with older teenage males. But we do accept families with children, with older male teenagers, and we are working really closely with mom to make sure that they feel safe, that her teenage boy feels safe, and oftentimes they're coming and going. And so we're really just again, case-by-case basis, making sure that those families have what they need, feel safe where they are. And sometimes that for them is splitting up. And so sometimes we're housing half the family and the other half is staying with another relative, and that we stand by making sure that they define what safety means for their family. And then we make the arrangements that we need to keep them safe.
Okay, thank you. That's really helpful.
Yeah.
I think that's all the questions we have.
Okay, thank you, Catherine. Okay, everybody, thank you so much for joining in today. And I'm so appreciative of our 3 guest speakers. It's clear the passion that you have for this very, very important topic. And it was great to learn so much more about what we can do and where we can go and how we can help. So I'd like to go ahead and conclude, but thank you all again. And I hope you guys have an amazing day. Thank you so much.
Thanks,
Thank you.
everyone.